Hello, class. Let's review our Week 10 color PDF. You can find this within your Week 10 module. We're going to talk about color theory. This is a really important concept to understand in the world of design and to really familiarize yourself with as you continue forward in the design space. So color is the most relative medium in art. This same color will look different in a small quantity than it does in a large quantity or surrounded by another color. And this is a great example of that. You can even see that this opacity transition here with the gray and the background on this particular poster for In Transit makes a big difference in how the yellow color correlates to the overall design aesthetic versus this that is speaking to us with shine and feels shiny and gives us that very bright aesthetic. So color can be utilized in multiple ways, even within its own color spectrum. Color theory continued. So we can hear a single tone, but we don't see a single color unrelated to other colors. So therefore, color is constantly related to its surroundings and lighting conditions. Everyone has a difficulty remembering specific colors. Visual memory is very poor compared to auditory memory. If you ask a group of people to imagine the Bethel blue, everyone's going to imagine a different color. We can repeat a melody we've heard only once or twice, but we have difficulty reproducing a color we've seen 1,000 times. People also have very strong preferences when it comes to colors, and people have strong associations with certain colors or color combinations. Red and green together represent Christmas, pink is feminine, etc. Right? So these are things that we're very conditioned to understand when we plan out, potentially a room decor idea for the summer. We're probably not choosing red and green, right? We're thinking of that as a Christmas celebratory color. These prejudices are impossible to overcome, so you have to consider the mind of your audience when you're using color. And this is why it's so important to understand color theory, because when you're working with a client and they say, I want to open a spring boutique, and then they're like, I want to use red and green, you have to kind of understand how to talk them through the process of this is why we're not going to use red and green. For those of you that just might be working in marketing or something of that nature where you're more assisting in the process of maybe selecting these things with the designer, it's also important to understand what types of color combinations or recommendations you might want to bring to the designer to represent the overall aesthetic of the marketing flyer, template, website, whatever it might be that you're working on properly. Very few people are able to distinguish tonal value in different hues within close intervals. It is difficult to see whether a blue and an orange are of equal, greater, or lesser value when compared to each other. Okay, so it's easy to tell which is lighter or darker within shades of the same hue, so two different shades of blue or gray. All right, so then we move into vibrating colors. When two different colors have the same value, they vibrate. Because the eye reads value more than hue, vibrating colors compete for the eye's attention and are difficult to look at. So you want to avoid setting type in vibrating colors. And sometimes, again, this can be easy to do because, well, red and green is Christmas, yes, but we use them as complementary aspects. We don't want to necessarily layer them and create this vibrating color issue, especially when it comes to placing text. Very, very difficult to read. This just kind of walks through like red on green versus green on red, blue on orange versus orange on blue, right? So you can look through this. It just gives you an idea, all right, of kind of how these go together, what feels like it's vibrating and what feels like it's complementary. So let's look here about typography. So in typography, the lowest legibility occurs when type and background are of equal value. The smaller the type, the more tonal contrast it needs in order to be legible. This is tricky. When you get into design and you're laying out posters, you need to really understand, or menus or flyers, brochures, whatever it is, you really need to understand this. This is really super important when it comes to this contrast, right? So tonal contrast is essential, especially in smaller type. And really, I would argue even in larger type as well, because even if you had larger type and the same tonal contrast, it would be very, very difficult to read this if you were driving by on a billboard, right? This is a color theory I'm sorry, this is our color chart for our color theory study here. So there are innumerable colors, but there are only about 30 names of the different hues of colors. The more you work with color, the more you will develop a critical eye for color relatedness. So the more you work in this field, the more you design, the more you lay out color variations, the more you will become familiar with different variations of a certain green. And sometimes it'll kind of make you laugh because you'll think, oh, okay, but that's kind of like this green. And from one designer to another, you might start to understand each other a little bit more with, okay, but it's more of this soft lime green. And that will ring in someone's head like, yes, I know which area of hue you're talking about. So these are kind of funny things that will develop over time as you continue to design. You need to make a decisive difference in quantities of colors. All right. So don't distribute color evenly over the page, but make one color predominant and another subordinate, or we would say primary and secondary potentially as well. So this is especially important when using complementary colors or values. It's actually fundamentally important to your overall design aesthetic and the messaging you're telling too, right? It's going to be very hard to sell a story or sell a message or create a specific messaging that is going to be received in a way that you want it to be received if they can't even read it, right? If it's just all blue or all yellow, it's too much. Okay, so it's really important to understand this. And I encourage you guys to even take some time to do some research, go through some minimalist poster ideas and concepts and kind of start to gauge and harness, okay, yes, this makes sense. Look at some brochures and get yourself familiarized with this is what decisive differences in quantities and colors look like. And you may even find something you're like, okay, but I don't actually think that this one is decisive enough between these two color contrasts. And here's maybe what I would have done different. All right. So just important things for you guys to do independently outside of class too. So choosing colors are like putting together an outfit. For example, you probably wouldn't wear a bright red skirt with a green shirt. Both colors are so strong, they'd compete for attention. You would also look like a Christmas card. So again, this goes back to those subconscious associations that we have with certain colors. Let's talk color palettes. So bright red pants are going to look better with a black shirt, or wearing a white shirt with green pants could work. The same general principles apply when you are outfitting your page with color. So color palettes, RGB versus CMYK and how it will print. This is really super important to understand as well. So on-screen colors look very different from printed color. Different monitors and printers will show and print color differently. When working with color, you have to go by how the color looks in its final format. Print things early and often to make sure all looks fine. So I always encourage anyone in the design field that you're prepping to design maybe a menu or a brochure before you send off 500 of those. I definitely encourage you to get a test print and ensure that it is actually turning out the way that you want that color to look. Be mindful of the fact that you are going to want that RGB for the RGB purposes and your CMYK for your CMYK purposes when you are designing as well. That wraps up our color theory review. If you have any questions, please let me know.